building on the success of one of the most striking Ferraris ever made. Its successor was more or less equally powerful and fast on the track. Many did not appreciate the F50 enough just because it was not a proper improvement from the twin-turbo V8, but there is a lot more to that than just pure performance. The F50 received something the F40 or any other Ferrari never had: a true Formula 1 based power plant. The Ferrari F50 was engineered to celebrate the company's 50th anniversary, while its predecessor accommodated a Group B-inspired twin-turbo engine typical for the 1980s era. The new Halo car went a different way. Ferrari had been performing well in Formula 1, and although they were not super successful, they had great engines, renowned for their remarkable whale. The 3.5-liter era was magical, and Ferrari decided to install such an engine into a road-going automobile. Following a number of other racing 12-cylinders in Ferrari's history, the engine in question was the Tipo All-36 that came out in 1990, succeeding a 670 horsepower Tipo All-35/5 unit that was the first one after the turbo ban in 1990. The engine produced nearly class-leading performance with 690 horsepower and came from a Ferrari 641, a car that won 6 GPs, scored 110 points and finished second in 1990, driven by Alain Prost and Nigel Mansell. Besides an 11,000 RPM 4-liter variant, the F130E was used in the Ferrari 333 SP developed to compete in the World Sports Car Championship, so it is evident what a monster of an engine they placed into a road car. The Ferrari F50 was a very special car that featured much of the racing technology, including a carbon fiber chassis, push-rod suspension, the power plant with the gearbox directly bolted to the monocoque carrying the rear suspension, or the F1-based engine itself. Since the V12 revved up to 14,000 RPM, there was plenty of work to do to make it road suitable, and Paolo Martinelli, not the bishop but the head of Ferrari's engine development, was chosen for the task. Building on the original 65-degree engine block, the cast iron crankcase architecture remained with the twin aluminum double overhead cam heads and Nikasil-coated cylinder liners. In the first place, the cylinder dimensions were largely increased, as the basic layout would not allow an increase in bore by more than 1 mm. The majority of the cylinder enlargement took place on the forged crankshaft by 16.4 mm. Remarkably, it was still a decently over-squared engine that retained a solid high RPM potential. This result brought the displacement to 4.7 liters. The crankshaft was not only a stroker, but re-engineered to be mounted on 7 plain main bearings, as interestingly, the updated F1 All-37 race engine featured 4 roller bearings. All internals were high quality, with forged aluminum mallet pistons, forged titanium connecting rods, and forged steel nitrided camshafts. Cam covers, oil pump, and water pump housings were magnesium, and the valve train featured 5 valves per cylinder. All this hardware was made to withstand engine speeds up to 9,000 RPM, although a fuel cutoff occurred at 8,640 RPM. The F130B is incredibly unique, and it wouldn't be this powerful without the various modern features of the time. The air enters from both sides of the engine through the air filters. It passes through MAF sensors into carbon intake plenums, each for one engine bank. The plenum is divided by a variable intake flap that closes at low revs to increase torque and acts as 2 inline threes side by side. When high RPM is reached, the flap opens to provide highest possible power. A huge part of the work is done by the 5-valve setup that delivers exceptional volumetric efficiency. Similarly to the variable intake flap, there is such a system in the upper part of the exhaust that also opens via intake vacuum to boost peak performance. Thanks to this ingenious engineering, the F1-derived V12 produced 519 horsepower at 8000 RPM with one of the highest specific outputs of the time, reaching 110 horsepower per liter. The fueling and electronics are controlled by a Bosch ECU, and there is a dry sump lubrication integrated into the final drive housing with 3 scavenging ports. Having this much power at disposal requires clever cooling, and the F50 surely has that. The engine itself has a front-mounted water radiator accompanied by a left-mounted engine oil cooler. Besides the aircon cooler on the other side, the F50 also received a transmission heat exchanger that heats up the gearbox oil as well as cools it down if necessary. The intercooler is water-cooled via the engine cooling system. When the car is stationary, there are thermostatically controlled electric fans on the under tray that circulate air through the engine bay from bottom to top via the top-mounted vents on the engine hood. In case you wonder about the fuel economy, the official number is 8 miles per gallon, or 29 liters per 100 kilometers combined. Last but not least to mention is the even more extreme version of the Ferrari F50, with the engine having deep roots from the F1 and World Sports Car Championships. It was meant to be placed back on the racing grid dressed as a Ferrari F50 GT. Following the F40LM variant, the F50 GT was designed for the GT1 series, but for various reasons, the program was cancelled. Out of 6 chassis built, only 3 were fully assembled and the rest were allegedly destroyed. There were 4 or 5 more supplementary engines made. In the heart of this magnificent race car was the 4.7-liter F130A tuned beyond imagination in the late 1990s. The power was increased to 750 horsepower, torque went up to 529 Nm, and maximum revs peaked beyond 10,500 RPM. Initial tests in 1996 suggested a performance faster than the 333 SP, having 872 horsepower per ton, over 100 more than the LMP race car. The F50 GT was only around 40 kilograms heavier, and the power of the 4.7-liter was outrageous. The top speed was 376 km per hour and 0 to 100 in 3 seconds, using a sequential manual transmission. The Ferrari F50 did not receive the deserved love and respect from many right from its birth, as it turned out to be equally as capable or sometimes even worse than its predecessor. However, it is the F50 that holds true to the original Ferrari DNA, with a V12 beating in the middle of its body. Moreover, there are only a handful of supercars powered by an actual race car engine, let alone an F1 unit, which is even more extreme, and that definitely deserves a high level of respect. It's a pity that Enzo could not live long enough to see this marvelous creation. In 2019, an F50 long block was auctioned off for a price tag of nearly €84,000.